Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our CCW recap webinar. Everyone is selling AI. No one's selling the proof that it works. I'm Karaline Venezia, Capacity CRO, and thank you for joining us today. We also have Ryan Stomel. I'll let Ryan introduce himself.
Yeah, hey everyone, Ryan. I'm the SVP of AI Innovation at Capacity, and my background is in quality assurance. I've spent more than a decade in evaluating how customer interactions are working and how we can improve them. So Caroline and I just got back from CCW. It was like a month ago. It feels like it was yesterday because it's just been a lot of content to go through, and we wanted to share a lot about what we thought and what we heard. I think we should start this off by at least disclosing some of the bias up front. Like, we had a booth, we're a vendor in this market, but we were listening there to some of the buyers all week. But I think it's important to make sure that we give like a practical framework about deciding which vendors and are strongest and which ones are just simply saying the same words. So excited to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think it is slightly biased that we are having a webinar, but I think part of the feedback that we have coming back from CCW, and again, even as a vendor, was just the confusion that came out of the show around everyone that was there. Sounds like they're saying the same thing, and that they're doing AI agents, they are using LLMs, agentic AI, the verbiage across the floor, if you look down the floor, seemed all the same. And so as running a contact center team, selecting a partner has to be incredibly difficult. And I think the way to do that is becoming harder and harder. You can go to a conference and walk the floor and you hear every single vendor on that floor say the same thing. Or if you're listening to analyst reports where, again, it's biased in terms of who's featured in those reports, it's got to be incredibly difficult. And so we wanted to use today to really just have a frank discussion around if I was a buyer at CCW, how would I choose a vendor to partner with? And I think there's a couple ways to do it that we want to get into today. But I think that the number one, if we think about a takeaway from this conversation, is how do you walk away just unbiased to decide, is what they're saying reality? Can they deliver on what their promises are? And I think there's a couple key ways that we're going to recommend today on how to do that. Everyone sounded the same. It was just a very noisy event from my perspective.
If you actually walked around the floor and you removed logos from the booth and all these hot marketing buzzwords and fluff that's around every single booth, it would be hard to understand and explain who provides like a model and who builds the agent, who evaluates it, and who stays involved after going live. As a buyer, it's hard to understand what everyone is doing when everyone sounds so qualified, and it's you're trying to ask them to prove it before they actually go live. It's very difficult. And so if we're sitting in the buyer's chair, like you said, like, how would we choose a vendor? How can you trust also what you're seeing on the floor, which is like an extremely good polished demo, versus what reality is, and how to get through that hurdle is something I think we should talk about.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple keys here. I think there's several different products that I think people fall into that bundle of agentic AI in the contact center space, and it's AI agents for voice and across other channels to deflect. It's the real-time agent assist. It's conversational intelligence and AQA to score conversations. And I think the power of all these solutions is, you see vendors that only provide individual solutions or more point solutions, and you see more of a capacity where it's a platform play where you can get all of the solutions with one partner. And I think there's a distinction there that needs to be made as well in terms of how to select the right partner. And I think it also plays well into the conversations that we had when people came up to the booth. One of the biggest topic areas that we heard over and over again was questions around AQA. And I think there's a couple reasons for that, and it plays into how do you actually pick the right partner? But I know this is your background. What are your thoughts on AQA and why it was driving so much of the conversation that we saw at CCW?
AQA matters now more than ever, is because I don't think buyers truly have the confidence that these AI agents are actually behaving correctly. And we've seen it firsthand. We understand it, and we can actually see and evaluate where they're failing. And I think that's really important. They're not necessarily saying, can you build the agent? They're really asking is, can you prove that it followed the policy and handled the customer correctly and escalated it appropriately, followed all the guardrails, and ideally just improved the outcome of it. So this is where, from the past, was always a contact center reporting function. and it controlled helping the agent behavior and managing that. And so our conversations with CCW, clearly AQA and analytics came up so much because I really believe buyers want to validate that the AI is working at scale and not just from a handful of cherry-picked calls that you can do. So the real best practice is starting with a lot of the conversational data that the business already has, including historical transcripts, reasons why people are calling, but then understanding where the automation's failing and like identifying what are the edge cases that a potential agent has to handle. So, we can talk through designing those use cases, but realistically, I mean, why do you think like confidence, Karaline, has become such a major issue for various buyers and operators?
Yeah, I think we're last year and the year before when you went to CCW, I think, or just in general conversations with prospects, it was around, to your point, can you build an AI agent? Show me the demos. Let me hear the agent. Let me make sure it sounds natural and human-like. And I think we've evolved past that. The technology's advanced so quickly, so fast that now that's table stakes. People trust that you can build the agent. People trust that it's going to have a conversational voice and it's going to be a natural interaction. I think where the trust is starting to fall down now is, okay, are they working? Are they doing what they want them to do? Is the interaction that you're having, a consumer is having with an AI agent, comparable to what they're having with one of our human agents? Does it have that sensitivity to pivot when somebody's intent or questions change during the experience? I think AQA is the answer to that. It's the ability to really be able to go back and say, yes, the AI agent actually is performing, or no, this is where it's falling down and this is how we continue to optimize it. So I think it's just part of the evolution that we're seeing with people implementing AI in the contact center environment, is that it's moved past the table stakes, can you deliver an agent, to can you actually effectively measure it and prove to me that it's working and it's following the guardrails that we want it to follow?
Yep.
Yeah, and there were quite a few conversations that we had at the booth. I would say 90% of the people that came up, their first question was around AQA and just how do you score? What is your ability to do that? I think the second topic was really around that voice agent. If you look at a customer today, that it's a conversational, it's an engaging experience. It has that human-like element with an AI agent. I think how many of them are actually good is really the conversation that we're getting to. And I think there's a couple keys to it on the side of an AI agent. And we're saying voice here, but I think that applies across the board to any AI agents, which are, can it deflect the volume that we want it to? And what are the right areas to have it focus on? You mentioned this before. I think AQA used to be more of that operational compliance component. It still is. It can still do that. But one of the best ways to partner with a vendor that can build an agent for you is to leverage that historical data. So can we take those historical call transcripts? Can we take the agent training database and knowledge and SOPs that are already built, leverage that to help clients understand, hey, here's where your agent should be focused. This is what it should be really focused on in terms of deflection, because I think that's an area where we continue to see clients that I work with come and ask, what should we have it doing? Where is it going to be positioned to get the best deflection rates and to really provide the best experience across the business? And again, what we've seen with clients like DSW and others that we're going to talk about later is being able to leverage the current data that you have within the contact center, the current call transcripts, is the best way to set us up for success, to really understand what's happening. And then this isn't a set it and forget it. It's a continuous refinement process. So we might start with an intent, like I'll use a generic example, like order status, to deflect the vast majority of calls that are coming in. And then we're going to continue to iterate from there. We're going to continue to understand, okay, what else can we tackle? And I think an important piece of this, and I know you'll speak to this a little bit later as well, is the human in the loop component of that. Yes, we want to be able to score and measure the experience with the analytics that we have in the background, with the QA that's constantly running, but we also want a human team to be able to validate that. And our clients need to be involved in this development process so that they're calling in, they're chatting with the agents, and they're giving us that feedback. So we're automatically and continuously training them on real world feedback. And again, I think that's an iterative process. So it's something that, as we talked about before, we're getting past the just basic delivery to how do we continue to optimize these in real time and have that continuous learning loop for optimizing at scale.
Yeah, so we actually got a question from the chat here, and I thought it was really helpful. I think it's really interesting. So, what does human in the loop actually look like in practice without creating like a really large manual QA operation? That's really interesting because now we're talking about deflecting a bunch of opportunities, so you're freeing up some human time. But are you just, pushing these people over to doing another job? And how do you kind of eliminate that, or augment AI QA with the humans to make sure that it doesn't have this now massive manual QA operation?
The way that I think about QA is, we have AQA that can do the scoring of a vast majority of interactions. So what are those interactions that we want to continue to score, both the AI agents and whatever human agents that are on the team as well, where we can say, how are they performing? How are they scoring across the different areas that we're measuring? And then we're using the humans to escalate any of those that do have low scores. So we're not just assuming that the feedback is getting coached. We're escalating that up to a human team to do that review, to do that calibration, and then help that with the training process. So I think that step-by-step function is really helpful, where you want to have the humans validate low scoring calls, as well as high scoring calls, to make sure we're capturing the right feedback, we're getting the right insight to be able to optimize over time.
So I'll take a slightly different perspective on this, and I think humans can capture the noise that AI cannot. And what I mean by that is there are various elements of tone, emotionality, sensitivity, and overall, concerns that the AI agent may produce that another AI agent may not be able to pick up on. So tonality and emotion are two different items that you may see that in the waveforms and the wavelengths, but realistically, a human is going to be the one that's going to need to pick up on the customer frustration and sentiment. There's two different versions of sentiment training that exists between lexicon basis and volume tonality basis. And in each of those regards, there's issues. And so where I think a human comes in is really evaluating and understanding what those nuances are and edge cases that an AI agent is not capable of doing. So that's definitely a big part of what we're doing. But in terms of kind of continuing to the evaluation of the vendor side, I keep coming back to this. Like, building these agents is table stakes. It's not that difficult, but the happy path demo is super easy. But what makes the agents really effective, and you touched on this as well, is that you ground them in real calls. You ground them in real workflows, knowledge bases, and policies, and all the integrations and escalation paths. And that is the starting point of any kind of AI agent that you want to create and exist. So the client's own team is obviously very critical, and they're experts in the field. So their feedback really helps identify what went right, what's wrong, and what the agent needs to learn next. And we can help augment some of that human in the loop behavior through some professional services if there's not a lot of value from internal people doing it. But we can help optimize that work without really replacing the client's best business judgment. The important point is that the feedback is not sitting in some spreadsheet. It's really a governed change, and that's creates a new test and a measured improvement inside of the agent. I think that's really critical. But really identifying the operating model and making sure it's real.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, which is everyone can show, and I would be shocked if they didn't. Everyone can show a really impressive demo. I think the step that I would highly recommend anyone evaluating a vendor take is to ask for that POC. So get them your real world data, get them call transcripts, and see, can they build an agent that is relevant, that can actually tackle some of the intents that you're hoping to tackle with your AI agent. And again, look at the speed at which they deliver that. So if you're getting call transcripts over, if you're getting your training data over, it's a good test to see how that partnership will work in reality. So how quickly can they turn that agent around? To your point, if you're giving feedback, so you're seeing those changes immediately, can they automatically score that? I think that's part of the platform versus point solution conversation that we were having before. If you're just working with a vendor who only does AI agents and doesn't have the AQA to complement that, you're really missing out on that component of it, to be able to go through and say, okay, we can automatically score and analyze 100% of your interactions whether they're human agent or virtual agent or AI agent interactions, but you don't have to go stitch that together with another vendor. You can do that with one partner. And so I would say if you're checking boxes, it's, can I pass you your data? Can you turn around an AI agent for me very quickly? If I'm testing that, one, do you come back to me with recommendations on how to optimize so that you know what you're doing, coach that? And then two, when you give that vendor feedback, are they able to implement it quickly? And on top of that, do they have a full platform? Do they have the ability to go and score 100% of your interactions? Can they use that data to constantly train and improve the model and the agents over time? And I think if we're looking at how to evaluate, I would say you really have to be able to check those boxes. And it's a great way to test, is it the right partner to move forward with from an implementation standpoint?
Yeah, I was most excited to get to this because there's not enough individual emphasis on all of the disciplines required to operate an agent safely. And like every company buying an AI agent is at risk of doing something that it would really never let any engineering team do, which is ship it to production without like a really completed testing and monitoring discipline. You look at the simulation, evaluation, and observability. Those are the three pillars here, I'd say. The simulation is really just like the test harness where you recreate historical calls and you generate all these synthetic scenarios before the customer ever hears an agent. So you're listening and looking for the interruptions and various. You create accents, visual like voice accents that are potentially hard for another agent to hear, and angry callers and policy exceptions and missing information and tool failures. All these ambiguous requests are necessary to create this full simulation as a precursor to this, and that's like the testing harness. And then really the evaluation area is the gate. So any kind of prompt change, model change, and workflow updates and knowledge updates, they should be graded against like a fixed rubric before it even ships. That's really critical. And why that rubric matters is it lets you kind of answer if the agent got better or if it was just better because it was simply different. So finally, it's the observability. That's what runs in production. So realistically, a transcript, I think it's really important to say, like a transcript will tell you what was actually said on a call, but a trace actually tells you why. So every turn, every retrieval, every tool call, the handoffs, the errors, the latency events, all of that is properly tracked, and it's really critical to understand those failures and why they happened. And then at the end of it, you close the loop. So every production failure becomes a failure test case, and every approved correction is evaluated before it turns to production. So the three things like I would ask any kind of vendor to show me here is show me like the test set that was created, what broke the last time anyone made a change to the system, and then I want to show a reconstruction of like one conversation that I choose. I want to see the turn-by-turn tool call by tool at any given time. But then if they also can't name the scenarios they're testing against, then they're just randomly testing, and it's not value. So if they say nothing broke, that's a good way to say nothing was being measured. So that's really the kind of the proof layer of all of this, and I think we've done that well with DSW. Do you want to touch on DSW and how that kind of came to be as well?
Yeah, I think it's a good example of kind of what we're trying to illustrate here in terms of, and again, we addressed this at the beginning. We know it's slightly biased, but I think it's a great example of where we've been able to partner with a client to really implement an AI agent that leverages all of the different examples that we've talked about on how we would here. And so just to set the stage a little bit, DSW, for anyone not familiar, is a retailer. They sell thousands of shoes. If you haven't been on site, I would highly recommend it. But they've been a partner of ours for close to 10 years now. And when they started working with us 10 years ago, I would say they were at the forefront of AI at that point and had decided they wanted to implement an IVR with the goal of deflecting a lot of those repetitive calls that were coming through and really just helping them to understand what are the call intents and making sure they were getting to the right areas. Fast forward to about a year ago, they decided to really implement one of the Gen AI agents that Capacity provides. And we were able to partner with them, given kind of the historical relationship that we've had, leveraging their data set. So understanding for the last couple of years, what were the call types that were coming in? What were the challenges that the callers had, what type of persona was calling in, and what their buyers were looking for. So we were able to help them move from that really scripted IVR type experience into that generative AI agent. And so what we did, as I said, we leveraged their historical data to really look for where should we focus first. So what were those areas that people were calling in that had low containment or that had high escalation or customer drop off? And we were able to leverage the current data set to figure out what were those call-in type intents that we wanted to focus in on, and then really start there to rebuild the agent. So making sure we had that generative foundation. So we wanted it to be context aware. We wanted it to be able to call in with an open-ended question and just say, hey, I'm looking for X. And the AI agent was able to help service them that way. And so what you've been recommending is those transcriptions to train the model, to train the agent, and leveraging that, putting the QA guardrails in place. So as we've talked about, we want to make sure that we have a system that can measure whether an agent is following the right path, whether it's drifting, and continuously train off of that, and be able to identify any of the issues, flag them, and use that as a feedback loop to constantly optimize the agent. And so we went through this whole process with DSW, leveraging their historical data, putting the guardrails in place, understanding where challenges popped up during testing, and then continuously iterating from there. And they saw some fairly fantastic results by implementing this. One, when you move from the more scripted flow into the Gen AI type flow, we saw 30% improvement in their containment rate, or 5x lift of containment. We saw a pretty big increase in overall satisfaction score as well by making that change, which again makes sense given you're moving from more of that scripted conversation to a very human-like flow. So being able to maintain those satisfaction scores. And I think a couple reasons for that. One, if you think about the containment rate pre Gen AI experience versus post, it's really because they're able to have that natural human-like experience. They're calling in, they can talk to the agent about whatever question that they're calling in for. But on top of that, we're connecting again to a lot of that training data on what worked in the past. So what were agents doing, and replicating that with the AI agent, so that the experience they would have with a human agent is very, very similar to what they would have with the AI agents on our end. And you can see that in terms of what the customer satisfaction scores look like as well. So as we talked about, I think there was a pretty big lift in CSAT on this as well by moving to that Gen AI experience, which again makes sense. Their shoppers are usually very engaged with their human agents, and you can see that transition now to the AI agents, where they're having those natural conversations, they're asking for recommendations, and it's providing that great experience that their buyers are looking for. What we're seeing again is, with this transformation that DSW and other clients are on with us, is that you have that data set already. You have the best data set to train these agents, and that is your historical data. You need the right partner that has that conversation intelligence, that QA capability to analyze conversations, to be able to create an agent that's going to be the most effective at really driving the containment and driving the experience that you want for your customers. DSW was able to save about 1.5 million in support costs with the AI agents over the last year of implementing that. And as we talked about, they saw significant improvements in their containment rates, in their CSAT scores as well by doing that. And again, I think that's the proof that we're trying to make sure that people are looking for when they're talking to the vendors, is that, can you actually take the data of what's working, what's not working in a contact center, build the AI agent, but then continuously optimize it over time to continue to see the results that you're looking for by implementing this type of technology. And Ryan, I know you worked with DSW as well. Any additional thoughts there?
So what metrics should people review besides containment to ensure the AI is creating a good customer experience rather than just preventing escalation? I think that's a really good question, because we're focused a lot on containment, but by containment itself is not just an automatic win. You really could create a bad containment rate by just trapping a customer, and it would show contained. So there's ways that you can kind of manipulate some of this data and showing, hey, you got high containment, but realistically, the proof is the combination of it. It's like, was it the correct resolution? Did Was the customer satisfied? How much handle time was there? How often they're escalating? What's the customer effort? And finally, like the cost per contact is something that we should definitely talk through. But besides that, there's certain level of other benefits from a customer experience perspective. It's the dashboard that we have really to showcase this balances, I would say, three different things. It's customer experience, operational efficiency, and the financial impact. And when they all improve together, I think that's where you have a credible ROI story. But I kind of wanted to bring something else to this. There's a level of implementation here that I think a lot of customers underestimate. What are you seeing from that perspective of everyone getting sold on this dream, and it's so easy, but from a customer perspective, what do they need to be super responsible for?
It's a great point. And I think it's something that we see as well, where a lot of clients will come into this with, again, the vision is you want to be able to have these AI agents that, to your point, provide that great experience, are able to contain calls, are able to provide that ideal across the different metrics we talked about. But there is a level of effort on the client side. And absolutely, we want to be able to have clients that are going to partner with us to be able to build this out effectively. And it's not only what we talked about before, which is, your customers the best. The clients know the experience that they want to provide. And it's got to be a collaborative process. One, from getting us call transcripts, getting us training data, to two, once that initial agent is built out, doing a lot of the testing. So being ready to place calls, to be able to be that human in the loop initially, so that as you're placing calls and as you're looking at where is the experience going well, where is it falling down, understanding that it's not going to be perfect out of the gate. It's going to need that testing. It's going to need the feedback from your teams to continuously optimize and make this better. And I think that's the piece that it's a great point to call out, which is this is not a plug and play solution, especially if you want it to be that ideal interaction for your customers. Most of our clients are involved in selecting the right agent for their agent voice for their brand. It's selecting the right overall experience that they want the agent to have. And again, that takes time. So I think there's a piece of this that we need to do a better job setting expectations on the client side of, yes, we can do a lot of the heavy lifting of building, but there's certainly going to be work on the client side to make sure this is as effective as possible and really the experience that you want to provide for your customers.
We agree as capacity is that the underlying technology that is providing all of this is becoming more commoditized. There's not going to be any shortage of strong models or realistic voices or orchestration tools or point solutions. And I think speaking about point solutions, that those can be very useful. But the question from a buyer perspective is really they're the ones that are going to be left stitching this together for the separate vendors, whether it's like for voice or AQA or observability and evaluations and knowledge base and chat and integrations and optimizations and all the things that are required to successfully do this. And so the voice agent really cannot succeed, like you said, if it doesn't have access to the right knowledge, it can execute the right workflows and move across channels, which is really important, and then always be measured against the quality standard that the customer expects. We can kind of be direct about capacity's point of view here, is that we believe in bringing these layers together between the voice and chat experience and the knowledge foundation and the AQA and all the optimization loops that we help provide. And the technology, of course, will always matter, but the real differentiation is the partnership. And I think that we'd want to sit with the client, understand with the business, building the agent around the real workflows and remaining accountable for the outcome is very interesting. So I guess my final advice is for all of this is just don't buy a voice agent as an isolated feature. I think you're going to set up for failure and you're bind together a number of different solutions to execute on that. Anyone buying a voice agent should be looking at an accountable, like an improvement system and a partner capable of operating it with you.
Yeah, I would fully agree. And again, I think that the platform piece is a big component of that, which is does the partner have the right tools? And again, Capacity has that. I think it's a strong differentiator, which is you have to be able to provide the full solution set to be able to create an agent that's going to continuously learn, continuously get better and better over time. And on top of that, it's the partnership. We talked about it when we're coming back with the recommendations, which is you need to have a partner that can take your data, that you can look at and say, okay, come back to me with recommendations, that is going to sit down with you and really understand your business and be responsible for those outcomes. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from CCW is everyone can talk the talk, everyone can go through and show a really good demo, but can they sit down? Can they take your data, your transcripts? Can they take your feedback and turn that into a meaningful agent that is measurable and can get optimized over time? And I think that's where we need to differentiate.
Yeah. So, question time. So, how should a company decide which customer interactions to automate first?
I think it's using historical data. I would say if you are live in a contact center today and you're seeing what's the biggest driver of call volume and what you have a good data set on today, I would say that's how you picked. It's really what are those intents and interactions that can help get the car to the garage and prove the value of leveraging this technology first. I think there's always going to be people internally that have concerns about leveraging AI. And so you need to be able to select the use cases, from my perspective, that show ROI or outcomes fairly quickly and then iterate from there.
I think if you take the biggest opportunity to deflect, that's going to become, it could be a really tough build out from a technology perspective. And it could require different business units to be involved and could slow things down. I think at some level you want to eventually get to the biggest deflection opportunity, but ultimately I think you want to get a quick win first. And if a quick win is just being able to change out a simple press 1 to do this, press 2 to do this, in a very basic IVR flow into something that is an agentic agent, where you can say, hey, thanks for calling, and what do you need help with? That's a quick win that is not required all these different business units. So I would propose that you go for a quick win rather than something that is a massive deflection opportunity at first.
Where we see clients be able to get the buy-in internally. So regardless of what that is, based on what the data says, I think that's where you start.
Okay. And then here's another one that we got. What should happen when a voice agent gives the wrong answer or a connected system fails? So I'll take this one because a production agent should be designed to handle failures and like not designed around the assumption that everything is going to work perfectly. And that's where we go back to the first requirement is the observability. You need to be able to reconstruct the interaction, see what information was retrieved, what tools were called, where the issue needs to be transferred into like maybe a function or transferred to a human for escalation. And then that needs to enter into what we call an improvement loop. So was there potentially like a knowledge gap that we didn't understand, a workflow problem, a tool integration error, an evaluation gap, whatever it is, you understand what needs to be fixed. And then at the end of it, the beauty of the failures is it creates a new test case. I would consider this a red flag. I think every agent is going to fail along the way, but it's what happens and can the vendor explain and demonstrate how it will prevent it from failing again in the future.
I think appreciate everyone jumping on today and joining us for this. It was great to have a conversation, just a quick recap on CCW and what our takeaways were. But if there's any questions or anything that we can help with, always feel free to reach out.